Hi guys, Grand J here and welcome to another one of our videos. Opus 6 is just right around the corner and today we'll be doing the third part in our video series, the Opus 6 win cards. So let's get started. So we have, for the first card is Evoker. It's a card from the set of 1 CP backups. Evoker is the win variant, and amongst all the elements that are likely to play the 1 cost backups, Wind is probably the first or second most likely color to play this, simply because Wind has the most amount of cards that reactivate your backups, and obviously you want to have as many backups as possible when you do this, just so you don't have to discard as many cards, and so you're getting the maximum value out of cards like Ashura and Diablos. So this card is definitely much stronger in Wind than any other color because it is an element that wants to ramp up a lot more. So yeah, it's a solid card, and if you're playing mono Wind, and I've got a video online for a mono Wind Canny Center Bart's deck that does make use of this card, so definitely do try it out, but otherwise I'm really looking forward to this card. Next we got Zidane. This is a 4-cost legendary for Wind for this set. It is 7,000 power, so it's a bit below the curve, but its power certainly does make up for its lower stat line. So first of all, Zidane cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities, and this is a very potent ability by itself. But when your opponent discards a card from his or her hand due to your summons or abilities, choose one Wind character, activate it. So this is a really strong effect. But in addition to this, he's also got a third effect as well. When Zidane attacks, your opponent reveals his or her hand, select one forward from their hand, your opponent discards this card. So this card is unbelievably good and is probably the reason why this card is going to be the most valuable legendary of this set. So first of all, he does have inherent protection in the fact that, he can't be chosen by your opponent's abilities, so your opponent can only use some removal to deal with him. So that already protects his slightly more fragile body. But in addition to his combo potential of every time your opponent discards a card from one of your abilities or summons, you get to choose a Wind character and reactivate him. So do note it does say a Wind character, not just a Wind forward. So this allows you to reactivate backups, allows you to reactivate forwards, it allows you to reactivate monsters as well. And recently, some of you guys in the Final Fantasy TCG Facebook group might have seen a post by Josephir talking about a free card combo with this Zidane and this Doned and Jesper. So Jesper is a monster that you can dull to force both players to discard a card from their hand. Doned is a Wind forward that can dull itself to reactivate a monster. So while you have this Doned and Jesper on the field, you can use Jesper to force both players to discard a card from your hand. Then use Doned to reactivate Jesper, and when your opponent discards a card from their hand, you can use Zidane's ability to reactivate Doned, and then Doned can reactivate Jesper, and you can do this cycle again. So you can basically force both players to discard their entire hands with this ability. But in addition to this, just having this ability to reactivate a backup at the very least, whenever you just force your opponent to discard a card from the hand, is actually just really good value, and kind of just very quickly recoups the base cost of Zidane. So if you do consider that Zidane is effectively a 3-cost body on a 4 CP forward, as soon as you activate this ability once, you've already recouped the additional CP you would have invested in this forward. So it's really strong. Definitely this card feels like it's got a place in Wind Ice, simply because Ice is one of those colors that has the most discard effects. Wind does have a couple, but they do happen to be on the Zidane body, so unfortunately you very will likely have to play this with Ice. But that being said, Ice has so many discard effects, and they're all very well costed as well, that you're going to get a lot of value out of this card. And in addition to this, even if you aren't playing a Wind Ice variant, Zidane can inherently trigger his own ability by forcing your opponent to discard a forward from their hand every time Zidane attacks. So this gives Zidane a really powerful control type ability, in the sense that every turn you're looking at your opponent's hand and you can discard a forward from it. So obviously if your opponent doesn't have any forwards from their hands, then you're not getting any value out of Zidane's secondary ability. But looking at your opponent's hand is really strong, and definitely is a part of the sort of Wind archetype. There's quite a lot of Wind cards that allow you to look at your opponent's hand, and this is really, really strong in that regard. And obviously, if you do get to the point where your opponent doesn't have any forwards in the hand, and you can obviously tell if your opponent doesn't have any forwards in the hand, this unlocks a really powerful Wind summon that Wind had a little while ago called Chaos Walker. Chaos Walker destroys one of your opponent's forwards, but your opponent gets the benefit of being able to play a free forward from their hand. But obviously, if you're using this as a Zidane and your opponent has no forwards in their hand, oh yeah, you're not getting the value out of this Zidane to discard any cards from their hand, but you're guaranteed a very safe Chaos Walker on one of their forwards. So previously, Chaos Walker would have to be combined with something like Heroic Unit backup from previously, but now, yeah, you can also like sort of forego that and play a more mono windish build, and you can ensure your safety of using that card with this Zidane. So this card is really, really strong. It combos really well in Ice Wind. It protects itself inherently, and even when you don't play it as a draw color deck, this card is also very solid in itself. So I'm super excited to try this card, especially in a Wind Ice build, to see what sort of like obnoxious broken shenanigans we can pull off with this card. Next we have Sid 2. So it's a 4 CP backup that's got double search for one backup of cost 1, add it to your hand. So basically the only backups in this game that truly cost 1, so that actually have cost 1 as opposed to being effectively cost 1, are the Evoker / Summoner like series of backups. So obviously there's a maximum of 3 targets in your deck if you're playing a single colored deck. So that would be the 3 copies of Evoker in your deck. Obviously if you're playing Draw color, you can have up to like effectively 6 cards for this card to search out for. So this card's actually like pretty decent value. But the caveat is that if you're playing Draw color, Evokers and Summoners actually become less convenient to play, because in order to play an Evoker for effectively 1 CP, you need to already have a backup of that color on the field. So yeah, so you need to have a win backup on the field already in order to play Evoker for 1 CP. And similarly, you need to have a backup of like fire or wind or whatever in order to play an Evoker of that color as well. So in that regard, Sid's ability becomes less consistent when you have more Evokers in your deck, because those Evokers or summons that you're picking up, they're much more cumbersome to put into play. That being said, though, let's sort of look at the sort of stat line for Sid. So Sid is a 4 CP backup. So typically most 4 CP backups, or at least a lot of them, become effectively 2 CP backups because they draw you a card or search you for a card, right? So in that regard, Sid doesn't immediately search you for a card. He has to dull himself. So effectively, on the first activation, you've effectively spent 5 CP. So the 4 CP put him down, and like the dulling of his ability to get you 1 Evoker and put it into your hand. So you've kind of like netted back 2 CP. So effectively, you've this backup was a net 3 CP value package after 1 activation, right? After the second activation, it becomes effectively so you would have spent 6 CP in total, and you would have collected 4 CP back. So it becomes effectively a 2 CP backup after 2 activations. And on the third activation, you would have spent, 7 CP, and you would have gotten 6 CP back. So it becomes effectively a 1 CP backup after the third activation. Now, the issue is that if you do draw these Evokers during your mid or early game, then you've got less targets in your deck for Sid to like search out for. So while it might be a really cool gimmick to load up your deck with like 5 or 6 copies of Evoker, and use Sid to search for 1 every turn to sort of like get you advantage, in a monocolor deck, in the best scenario of over 3 turns, you use his ability 3 times, this still only fundamentally makes this backup a 1 CP backup. Of course, you can use abilities to reactivate him and then like get a lot of value out of him straight away. Maybe pull some cool shenanigans with Legendary Zidane where you force your opponent to discard and reactivate Sid, so you can then use Sid's ability to search out for another Evoker and so on. So yeah, definitely in terms of that, it's like inconsistent. So it's not something that you might want to bring to a more premier tournament. But in terms of like a casual weekly tournament, if you're okay with like your deck just kind of bricking occasionally, I can see some crazy shenanigans where just 1 turn you reactivate Sid like 2, 3, 4 times, and you pull like 3 or 4 Evokers from your deck and put them into hand, just get a whole lot of CP for that. So this card is definitely one of those cool combo type cards. In terms of just like a purely tempo card, I think it doesn't give you enough value. But yeah, this is one of those cards that can do some obnoxious things if you accept the fact that it's not going to be consistent every time you do it. Next, we have Sid Hayes. It's a free CP backup, EX burst. When Sid Hayes enters the field, search for 1 job standard unit forward and add it to your hand. So this basically gives us the wind equivalent of a water backup that we already had. So yeah, so it allows you to just search for a standard unit. So in wind, it's actually pretty solid as well in the sense that you can also there's a lot of solid standard units that you can pull out. You can pull out Ranger, and one of the like tier 1.5, tier 1 archetypes for win is Chocobo. So most of the Chocobos, besides from Fat Chocobo and Black Chocobo, I believe are standard units. So yeah, so definitely there is a place in Wind for this. In addition to this, Wind also has a backup specific to buffing up standard units, and that comes in the form of Arc. So yeah, Arc increases the power of all your standard units by plus 1,000 power. So definitely Sid Hayes and Arc do combo well into each other because they have that like standard unit synergy. On top of this, yeah, you've just got a lot of very good, powerful, like just like well-statted, powerful standard units in Wind. So yeah, in a dual color deck of like Wind Water standard units or Wind Fire standard units, there's some very interesting things you can do. And there's a cool little combo later in this set that I'll be talking about where you can pull off a very interesting Wind Fire standard unit combo type shenanigans. Next, we have White Mage. It's a 2 CP backup, and I think that this is going to be one of those super underrated backups, and it's going to be one of those backups that are just going to cause so many games to be prematurely lost. So when White Mage enters the field, choose one card in your opponent's break zone, remove it from the game. So not super impressive. Yes, it is kind of an interesting tech card, but its second ability is what really sets this card apart. So for 1 CP, put White Mage into a break zone, choose one card in your opponent's break zone, remove it from the game. All right. So while like you're breaking a backup and you're spending 1 CP, you're not effectively gaining any sort of like card advantage on your opponent. In fact, you're losing card advantage because you're breaking this backup, right? But this card, because it's like an ability, you can like put it on the stack, which means you can use it in response to your opponent's card effects, right? So any situation where a card like this exists as a stackable ability in any game, it's always a way to counter your any sort of abilities that your opponent might have that specifically target the bin or the break zone. So if your opponent is playing like Devout, so the 4-cost ice backup Devout that allows them to bring a forward of cost 4 or less back from the break zone and put onto the field, they have to choose their target upon activation. So in response to that, you can use White Mage's secondary ability to remove that forward from the game, effectively fizzling out that ability. So yeah, you get a huge amount of like tempo advantage when you do that, right? In addition, like unlike a lot of backups, this backup, when you break it, you don't actually have to dull this backup. You only have to pay one CP. So you can always discard a card from your hand, even if this card is dull. So there's going to be a lot of situations where your opponent just kind of overlooks the fact that you have this ability, and you just use this to counter or one of the really strong card effects. So you might be thinking, oh yeah, cool, it counters Ice Devout, but that's a very niche card. Like, so that's a very niche tech to like for a very specific card, right? But you'd be surprised that there are actually a lot of cards that choose cards from the break zone. So if you're playing against Water, a mainstay of Water for a long time has been Lena, and that allows them to bring a Fame Mimic Go-Go or a Ephemeral Summoner or a Knight back from the break zone back on the field. When they choose whatever they're targeting, you use White Mage, break it, remove it from the game, and your opponent doesn't get that effect. If your opponent's playing Fire and they're playing Phoenix, yeah, that's another situation where you can just like remove it from the game. And any sort of backup where your opponent gets to put a card from the break zone back to their hand, you can remove whatever their target is. So if your opponent is playing Lightning and they're playing Sage and they want to pick up that extra copy of like any card, then yeah, you can remove from the game. So White Mage has actually a lot of targets. But not only that, any sort of cards that have abilities that can be triggered from the break zone as well, or like sort of costed effects that trigger from the break zone that put them back to hand. So for example, Kuja is a new legendary from this set where you can put 2 ice backups from your field to the break zone to turn them from your break zone back to your hand, right? If your opponent does this, you can respond to this ability by removing the Kuja, right? So even though technically Kuja isn't targeting himself, if you remove Kuja from the game, he no longer gets to put himself from the break zone back to the field. So you can effectively cancel his ability by using this White Mage ability. Same with Null, where you can return him from the break zone back onto the field. And even certain cards that trigger from the break zone, White Mage can stop them as well. So if your opponent is playing that Dark legendary from previous set, Eldnark, where anytime she's sent from the field back to from the field to break zone, put it to your hand. Once it goes from the field to break zone, it triggers its ability. If you use White Mage to remove it, she doesn't go back to the owner's hand. So This card is like crazy powerful tech. You don't have to keep it active, so your opponent might overlook it, the fact that it's like a dull backup. And yeah, it just counters a lot of things. There'll be a ton of times where your opponent will just activate something, you counter their breaks on target, and they've just like wasted the entire effect. So yeah, so moving forward, if I'm playing a win deck, I would like to try to try to experiment and have at least one copy of this in the backup line, just for situations where it does become useful. You can get a huge amount of value when your opponent just makes a mistake. So I think that this card is really strong. Definitely not one of those cards where you want to have like 3 copies of. But if the metagame becomes prevalent with these sort of abilities, then like I think most win decks will want to like try to run 1 or 2 in their deck. Next we have Shinra. It's a 4 CP backup, EX burst. When Shinra enters the field, you may search your deck for 1 Job Gullwings forward and add it to your hand. So currently amongst the Gullwings forwards, we have all copies of Pain. We have both the original Riku from the set 1 starter deck, the new Riku, and now the new water forward unit. These are older Gullwings that we have, so there's not a huge amount of targets. Previously, from set 1 starter deck, we also had Brother, which is 3 CP searcher for any Final Fantasy X character, where Shinra only can search for Gullwings specifically. So yeah, so there's pros and cons to this. Obviously, Shinra does cost 1 CP more, but he does have EX burst, so that is that factor. Also, when you use Brother, it doesn't lock out your ability to play Shinra. So in a like Rina Yuno Riku Pain deck or YRP deck, you can play both Brother and both Shinra, so you can get like that additional search as well. So yeah, this card doesn't really fulfill a function that we didn't already have, because Brother was able to do effectively what Shinra does, except it's not EX burst, and Brother does cost 1 CP less. So ultimately, you'll only play Shinra in a deck where you're playing more of the Gullwing forwards, simply because if you're playing just a like strictly classical YRP deck, you've only got Pain as a forward because you were previously playing Riku and Yuna as backups. So and Shinra unfortunately isn't able to search for backups even if they are Gullwings. So yeah, so Shinra's ability is a little bit niche. I'm surprised it isn't a free CP backup, just because there's not too many targets for it to hit, and I don't think that there are going to be that many targets released in the future that this backup can hit. So it's a little bit, it's like I feel it's a little bit overcosted, and the Gullwings from this set seem not underwhelming, but not amazing either. So yeah, so definitely it's viable in that Gullwings deck, and I definitely would like to try it and see what this new YRP combo is like. But I'm a little bit skeptical of what this brings to the archetype that didn't already exist in Brother. Next we have Zu. It's a 4 CP monster for 0 CP until the end of the turn. Zu becomes a forward with 7,000 power. When Zu attacks, choose 1 backup you control, activate it. You can only use this ability once per turn. So at 7,000 power at 4 CP, it is a little bit overcosted. But upon its first activation, you do reclaim 1 CP back. So you are effectively paying a 3 CP for a 7,000 power forward. That is a transforming monster. So in that regard, it kind of sort of works out. So especially if you've got any sort of board wipe type abilities, or if you're playing the Opus 1 legendary Valor forward that returns all forwards back to their hands, while you play Valor forward, if you have monsters on the field that aren't considered forwards, yeah, you get to keep those monsters on the field, and then allows you to attack through with forwards that can't be blocked, like Zu and all your other forwards. In regards to like this card's ability, personally, if I were to build a strategy that does take into account monsters, I would much rather play Chocobo Droid in a lot of cases, because Chocobo Droid can only be blocked by 1 and 2 cost CP forwards. So it's very difficult to block, whereas Zu is at 7,000 power and having no evasion type abilities, it is reasonably easy for your opponent to block. Yeah, so and the ability to reactivate 1 backup, while it is handy at times, it isn't one of those abilities that Wind already doesn't just have like a shit ton of anyways. And unfortunately, Wind doesn't have too many backups at 1 CP that you can just kind of abuse with this card's reactivation ability. And yeah, already you have like tons of cards such as like No Knows What that can reactivate your backups as well. So really the only one deck that has just like a like dull backup ability that you can just kind of abuse the shit out of is Fat Chocobo, and obviously that only works in the in really a Chocobo archetype. So I don't think a zoo really sort of fits into like the Chocobo deck. And otherwise, Wind doesn't really have a need for this because they already have a ton of other cards. But I guess if you're building a Wind deck and you kind of want to have like a monster or two, and you want to play some interesting shenanigans with Valor, then definitely give this card a shot. Next, we have the new Chocobo, and this card is very interesting, and it's going to open up some really, really like dumb wins. As casual as these wins may be, this is actually like a pretty abusable card. So it's a free CP forward at 3,000 power, so it is quite below the curve. When Chocobo enters the field, you may play one card named Chocobo from your hand onto the field. There are a lot of targets in Wind, obviously because there's a lot of Chocobos. But an interesting thing to note is that this Chocobo can play another copy of itself. And when that Chocobo comes into the field, it can play another card named Chocobo from your hand onto the field, right? So this free CP forward can actually allow you to just straight up play 3 of these Chocobos on the field. And the third Chocobo can then play like a 4th Chocobo that's like not a copy of this card, right? So literally for free CP, you can play 12 CP worth of Chocobos. You can go 3 copies of this guy, and then say 3 copies of the special Chocobo, and you've got like 12 CP worth of Chocobos on the field that you only pay 3 CP for, right? So you can just zerg out a whole lot of dudes, right? Now, oh yeah, you filled your board up with like 4 Chocobos, and they don't really do anything. So that kind of sucks, right? But if you combo this with Luna from Opus 2, that gives all your standard unit forwards haste, all of a sudden you've now got 4 Chocobos that have haste, and the special Chocobo can give another forward haste, such as Luna, right? On one turn for 6 CP, you can just zerg out 5 guys that have haste, right? Yeah, so that seems like a really, really crazy cheese strategy where your opponent, if your opponent's at 2 life and if they don't EX burst you, you just go bang, 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 put a whole bunch of Chocobos and Luna down, you swing in with all of them, and your opponent takes 5 damage, right? Out of nowhere, with just 6 CP. And a whole bunch of cards. Now, obviously, this is a difficult combo to pull together, but considering that there's actually a lot of support for Chocobos, like in the form of Izana that can search from, Fat Chocobo, and so on, there's actually some really, really crazy things you can do. So if you play Fat Chocobo, you can bring out this Chocobo, which allows you to play another Chocobo from your hand. There's some really, really crazy things that you can do with this card. Obviously, they're not like super consistent, and they're just kind of like they're kind of those like very bursty sort of blowout type cards. And if your opponent interrupts you, then yeah, you've really sort of like overextended yourself. But it's one of those cards where if you pull off this super cool combo, your opponent's just gonna like say this is some bullshit shenanigans that they lost to. Talking about Chocobos, we got a 1-cost summon, Chocomog. So it's an EX burst, search your deck for 1 job Chocobo or job Moogle and add it to your hand. Even though this card can search for both Chocobos and Moogles, we're pretty much only going to see it strictly in a Moogle deck, in my opinion. So yes, it is EX burst, so it does have some value there. But when a card searches for job Chocobos, there are actually only 2 Chocobos that are job Chocobo as opposed to named Chocobo, right? And that's Fat Chocobo and Black Chocobo. Because they're not named Chocobos, their job title is Chocobo. Whereas all the other just Chocobos, they're actually job standard units. So that's something interesting to note, that this card is actually not particularly effective at searching for Chocobos. And whilst Fat Chocobo is a very important key component to the Chocobo deck, you already have a way to search out those Chocobos in the form of Izana. So this card isn't really needed in the Chocobo deck. And in that regard, Izana kind of is better value than Chocomog in searching for Chocobos, because you have a 2 CP 5k body on the field. Despite this card, it having a advantage in the form of EX burst. But alternatively, you can also search for job Moogles, and there are a lot of Moogles in this game. So Win already has quite a couple of pretty strong Moogles in the form of just like Moogle, and we also have Nono. So these are pretty strong Moogles, but there's quite a couple of Ice Moogles are pretty strong as well. Mog 13, the Searcher. There's a new Wind Moogle from this set that has an S ability to search your deck for cards. So this card I think is going to be far more likely just to search for Moogle cards than to search for Chocobo cards. If you want to play this Wind Ice variant, definitely there was starter deck Sarah that was an ice card that had a whole bunch of synergy with Moogles. This is definitely a card that I see very easily fitting into that archetype. So yeah, so definitely if you are like a casual deck builder that wants to try out Moogles, definitely chuck this in. It's pretty good value for that regard. Next, we have Dabblers. It is a free CP summon. Choose one forward. Its power becomes 4,000 until the end of the turn. Draw one card. So this is kind of a very interesting card because it's kind of like middle of the road. Okay. So typically, like Wind doesn't have like particularly powerful summons in terms of removal or cards that sort of deal damage to your opponent's forwards. And I suppose that's kind of like a part of its identity as a color or an element. So yeah, in this case, Dabblers. It just makes your opponent's forward 4,000 power. So in a lot of cases, to reiterate, it makes a forward 4,000 power. So it can buff a forward that's below 4,000 power, or it can reduce a forward's power from above 4,000 to 4,000, right? So yeah, so something to clarify there. So in that regard, in most cases when you use this card, it's going to have a similar effect to Tushu Lane the Impure in the sense that you do get to draw a card and you are reducing your opponent's forward's power by quite a significant amount. So even if you consider the fact that you're reducing your opponent's like free CP 7k forward from 7,000 to 4,000, yeah, you'll generally win the fight. 4,000 is usually that stat level where you pretty much can't win any like forward to forward fights. And the fact that this card draws your card does kind of make this effectively 1 CP, or it does make it kind of a free CP summon that cycles itself as well. So in that regard, it's like pretty solid value. But by itself, it's kind of lackluster in that it doesn't remove a forward, and you have to either combo with damage, or you have to have your forwards in combat with this forward that you're Dabblersing in order to sort of really get value out of this card. So this card is like good value, but it doesn't do anything by itself and needs to be comboed, which does make it a little bit dependent or situational. So that makes me a little bit hesitant to play this card, even though it's actually reasonable value. And most of the time when you do play this in combat, you're probably going to just straight out outright win. So I don't know how I feel about this card. I'll definitely try it out. I definitely do feel that like in certain other type deck archetypes, the bigger 5-cost legendary Dabblers or the other 3-cost Dabblers might be a better choice. But yeah, so I'm not quite sold on this card just yet. Next, we have 4-cost Pain. So this is a new Pain from the set. It's a 4 CP forward at 8,000 power. Its job is Gullwings, so of course it builds into our Gullwings strategy. Its ability is Job Gullwing. Forwards you control cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons. So yeah, so that's just like an ongoing ability. And it's got an S ability, which is S Wind. All Job Gullwings you control gain haste until the end of turn. So this card, depending on how valuable the first ability will likely determine how much this card is played. Now there are quite a lot of very powerful summons in the game right now, especially in Wind as well as in Ice. So yeah, making your Gullwing forwards unchoosable by summons is pretty strong, and especially considering that Riku from the set has a complementary ability of making your Gullwings unchoosable by abilities. Now I was one of these players that played in Opus 1, and having legendary Zidane that can't be chosen by summons or abilities was actually pretty difficult to deal with. And yeah, so in the current metagame, there's like not too many sort of abilities or cards that are played very prevalently that can actively remove forwards from the field without choosing them. They're generally board wiping type abilities such as Shanto, such as Exodus. But yeah, outside these sort of niche situations, this protection ability is really quite strong, especially when you can have the Riku side to make it so your forwards can't be chosen by summons or abilities. So yeah, so in that regard, it becomes like a very interesting sort of mid-range tempo-y sort of deck. It's an S ability of like S for S Wind to give all your Gullwings haste. At best, that's only going to give 3 of your forwards haste because they're only effectively 3 Gullwings forward, which is Riku, Yuna, and Pain. So this ability isn't particularly overpowered, and yeah, it's just giving you guys haste. So so in that regard, like it's not a very powerful S ability. Even though there are quite a lot of pains in the game, the biggest issue with this card is that like there already exists a very good Pain already in the game, and that's the starter deck Pain that reactivates 3 of your backups if you control Riku and draws your card if you have a Yuno on play. And the thing is, I don't know if the new Gullwing strategy is a better build than the classic YRP build. Yeah, so I don't know if it's better. It really ultimately depends upon like how well you can keep your set of free girls protected. So next up is a card that my mate Jai got to reveal in his preset spoilers. It's a free cost backup Fujin. Its ability is EX Burst. When Fujin enters the field, you may search for one card named Seifer and add it to your hand. When card named Seifer you control gains first strike during your turn. So effectively it's another one of those cards that's effectively a 1 CP backup. That searches for a specific card. So in this case, it searches for only one type of card, which is Seifer. But Seifer or Seifer. But there are actually like 4 copies of Seifer now, I believe. So originally in Opus 2, there were 2 copies, and then there were 2 additional Seifers released this set as well. So yeah, so we now have 4 different copies of Seifer. Unfortunately, only one of them has an S ability because, only one of them has an S ability. Otherwise, this card would be a little, otherwise the Seifer combo might be a little bit too strong with how easy it is to get copies of Seifer. But yeah, giving him first strike is pretty good as well. Also because Raijin gives him haste, so basically, Fujin and Raijin create, and Seifer create this free card combo where you're giving Seifer, a lot of these cool, interesting buffs that also search for him, that allows him to sort of be a mainstay of a deck as well. So, in regards to Fujin, I think that, this particular Seifer from Opus 2 probably is the best Seifer to sort of combo with him. And this free cost Seifer, while it is a 5,000 power forward at free CP, where it is slightly below the curve, and when it is blocked or is when it blocks or is blocked, it gets to deal 3,000 damage to 2 forwards. And considering Seifer you control has first strike during your turn, if you're attacking with this Seifer, Seifer is able to beat out 8,000 power forwards because you deal them 3,000 damage with its ability, and you also have a 5,000 power body with first strike. So in that regard, for free CP and this entire combo package, it's actually pretty not bad. And so like this card, while like Seifer isn't particularly strong, and I don't think Seifer itself is strong enough to build a focused deck around, it definitely is one of those casual archetypes that you can sort of like build and have fun. Next is Geomancer. It's a 2 CP backup. Double, put Geomancer in a break zone, choose one attacking forward, deal it 4,000 damage. So I actually really like this backup for a couple of reasons, right? So one, it doesn't cost any additional CP. So just by sacrificing this backup, you can deal 4,000 damage, which is actually a lot of damage for like 0 additional CP input. And breaking it back up, 4,000 damage is a lot. And Wind is one of those colors that tends to be more defensive, or tends to be more slow or ramping with its build. So it does tend to be more defensive and does tend to be attacked a lot more. And yeah, dealing 4,000 damage is actually quite a lot. Considering there's a lot of wind forwards that are like around that mid-range mark, that around that 7,000 power mark. Geomancer will allow like all your smaller forwards to be able to trade up into your opponent's larger forwards, and it doesn't require any additional CP, and it's one of those backups that you can just kind of put down early on, and at some point it's going to be relevant, and it can just like dissuade your opponent from attacking, where your opponent, they might have invested in a larger like 9,000, 10,000 power forward, and if you can sacrifice a Geomancer to trade your opponent's big attacker with, say, your Moogle, which was just like a 6,000 power forward, it might dissuade your opponent from attacking. So in that regard, it gives you the space and time to develop your board, to develop your backups, and to develop your strategy. So this card is actually very cost efficient for what it does. Obviously, it isn't used for like non-attacking removal. But yeah, in a lot of these cases, I feel that Wind, that's kind of the pace that Wind sort of wants to take. So yeah, I really like this card. And now we're getting to a point in the game where there's just so many quality backups that it becomes really, really quite hard to choose which ones you want. But this is one that I do want to try out. In addition to this, it is a FFTA2 character. So in Wind from the previous sets, we had a card named Luso that looks at the top 5 cards of your deck and puts a FFTA2 card into your hand. And it's great that we have another FFTA2 card that can fit into that archetype very well. I think we're pretty much at the stage where it's possible to build a Wind Lightning FFTA2 archetype deck. So whether you want to play it in title series, or if you want to play it in a more casual weekly type event, yeah, I'm really excited to try this card out in both just like Wind in general, as well as an FFTA2 build. Next we have Pole, and this is going to be one of those like really like under the radar type cards until like someone like does really well in a major tournament with it. So it's a 2 CP backup at 4,000 power. So it is a little bit below the curve, but like not by much. Pole cannot be blocked by a forward that costs 3 or more. So yeah, this is a pretty strong ability, and it tends to be an ability that like only win forwards have. Yeah, so it can be blocked by a forward of 3 or more, which means that it can only block by a forward that costs 1 or 2. And generally, like at 4,000 power, Pole is going to be able to like at least fight those forwards, or at least those forwards are pretty easy to remove. That's the main thing, is that forwards of cost 2 or less are generally pretty easy to remove, especially if you have like a color like fire or lightning paired up with the deck. But here's a really cool thing. When Pole deals damage to your opponent puts the top 5 cards of his or her deck into the break zone. Now, a semi-competitive to almost competitive strategy that's been around in Win for a long time is Mill. It uses the heroic Riku from set 1 to constantly put cards from the top of your opponent's deck into their break zone. It was a control type strategy because it's an effect that you can only do like once per activation, and you will just slowly burning cards from the top of your opponent's deck. So you are generally a lot more defensive when you're trying to play that strategy, because you're just trying to hold your opponent's aggression off while you slowly mill their deck apart. But Pole, he actually is unbelievably strong for this archetype deck, but he forces you to play in a very different direction. So as opposed to playing Pole playing Mill defensively, if you can get in 1 or 2 hits with Pole, that's a huge amount of value, right? So 1 successful hit with Pole is equivalent of like 5 regular Riku activations. So that's like literally the equivalent of 10 like win CP that you would have to build in like a Mill win deck, that you can just get from 1 successful attack, right? So that's, and if you hit a second time, that's just like 10 cards off the top of the deck. That's so much additional, it's so much additional value than what Riku would have costed you in a similar sort of Mill strategy. Obviously, your opponent's going to like prioritize getting rid of this forward, and obviously your opponent's going to prioritize blocking this forward. But if your opponent doesn't have like if your opponent doesn't have small size forwards to block this, Pole is going to be able to get through, and so your opponent is going to be forced to use removal pieces on Pole a lot of the time. So yeah, so this actually brings a whole new dimension to the previous Mill archetype, and it's a very, very powerful card in that regard. So yeah, I think that this card is going to be slept on for a while until like someone really figures out a strategy that can really make use of this card. Unfortunately, in high level tournaments, winning via because damage is used as a tiebreaker. Unfortunately, damage is so when you win via Mill or your opponent runs out of cards from the deck, it's not considered a 7 damage win for you. So it's not counted as you dealt 7 damage to your opponent. It's whatever the damage is at that state. So the damage tiebreaker for milling is kind of bad, which is kind of one of the like worst parts about this game competitive wise, is that strategies that you focus on you receiving damage, or strategies that mill your opponent, put you at a really strong like damage tiebreaker disadvantage. But I really like playing these like sort of alternative like cheese type strategies, and Pole like this like adds like a whole lot of new cheese to this new mill archetype. Next, we got the second legendary of the set. It's Maria. It's a 2 CP forward at 5,000 power, so it's on curve, and it's got 3 abilities. For Dull, choose 1 category 2 forward other than Maria. It gains plus 2,000 power for until the end of the turn. Second ability is Dull. Deal 1,000 damage to all forwards an opponent controls. And the third ability is Win Dull. Choose 1 forward. During this turn, the next damage dealt to it is reduced by 3,000 instead. So this card has like a lot of abilities attached to it, and it's both like they're both strong offensively and defensively, and it comes on a pretty like small costed package. That being said, 5,000 power, it is a pretty difficult forward to protect. But Win does have some protection abilities in the form of like Aerith and that sort of stuff. The problem with this card is that it's on such a small, fragile body though, that it's quite easy to remove. And like while its abilities are pretty solid, there are no abilities on this card that you can use immediately. So it's one of those cards where you have to put down, you have to wait for it to come back to your turn in order to get those abilities. Yeah, so if this card had haste, then I could give it a lot more credit. In that like, yeah, it can like use one of these abilities straight away. But the fact that you have to like bank it for a turn, so you have to play down and protect it for a turn before you can like recoup one of these cards. effects really sort of holds this card back. Even as like if it were like a free cost backup, I'd still think this card is pretty solid. But like as a 2 CP forward at 5,000 power, it's really difficult to justify this card because of the difficulty of protecting it, or its like lack of combat power. Even though Wind has a lot of ways to reactivate its characters, I'm still quite skeptical of the strength of this card. In addition to this, its name is also Maria, which clashes with the backup Maria, which is like one of the strongest backups that Wind has, that gives all your forwards plus 1,000 power. And I think that that's the biggest drawback of this card, is that it is a card named Maria. Even though it is Final Fantasy 2 and it is a rebel card, so there is potential for it to sort of build into that archetype. Because of a lot of clashing issues of Maria and its slightly underwhelming or non-immediate impact, sort of really holds this card back. The best thing about this card is its art, because damn, that card looks so good. I wish they released like full art variants of cards in this game, because I would actually kill to get a full art variant promo of this card. Next, we have Moogle FF11. It's a 2 CP backup that has just S dull, search for one card and add it to your hand. So I think that this is the first card we've ever received in this game where you can just search your deck for any card, right? Now, unlike a lot of other card games, when you're searching your deck, when you get to search your deck for any card, like a non-restricted card, you generally don't have to show your opponent what that card is. But this was recently confirmed in a Twitter post online by Kageyama that the keyword search, you do have to reveal to your opponent what you search for, irrespective of if there are any restrictions on the card you can search for. So in this case, when you search for a card, you do have to reveal it to your opponent, unfortunately. So you do lose a certain surprise factor. So I think that this card is going to be mainly used for helping you search for answers anyway. So obviously, yeah, you can only discard like additional copies of this card as opposed to any card that says Moogle. So that does hold this card back a little bit. But the fact that, yeah, there exists Chocobo from this set that can search for additional copies of this, that's pretty good. And like especially in like a Moogle job deck that uses like Wind Ice and uses some of these like Moogle synergies, yeah, it's going to have a lot of interesting things you can do with this card. In addition, any sort of color or element that can recur forwards back from your breaks and back to your hand is also pretty good. Using that 2-cost Wind Summon Ashura can allow you to return a character of 2 or less from your breaks and back to your hand, which allows you to like pick up a copy of this so you can use its ability again. So this card, while it doesn't do anything by itself, as soon as you draw that second or third copy of this card, it has a lot of combo potential, and it like allows you to search for the combo pieces that you need for any given game state. So yeah, so I like this card. It's not like straight up one of those like super powerful cards that bring a lot of value. But yeah, so I think that there's a lot of ways to combo with this card, and I'm at a stage of the game where I'm actually happy to like give the Moogle job archetype a very solid crack. Next, we got Windburn, and and it's another one of these dragon, like cycle of dragon cards. So where the lightning dragon was like effectively Odin, the fire dragon is Bahamut, the wind dragon or the green dragon is literally just Alexander. It's a 2 CP monster that you can eventually pay win 1 for to put it into break zone, choose one forward of 9,000 power or more, break it. So this is one of those abilities that Wind has as part of his identity of destroying large forwards. And yeah, so it is stronger than Alexander in the sense that you can break its cost over 2 additional as 2 separate payments. So you can put this back. You can put this monster down at some point, and then later on in the game you can just like break it to instantly destroy one of your opponent's forwards of 9,000 power or more. So in that regard, it's got the advantage there, but it isn't EX burst. So yeah, so there will be times where, yeah, you hit a random Alexander off an EX burst and you just get to blow one of your opponent's 9,000s up. So it does sort of lack that. And I think that this ability might be a little bit too niche for the metagame. Like hitting forwards that cost 5 or more, is a lot more easier to do now than hitting a forward of 9,000 power or more. I also just noticed that I put the wrong Alexander down on the image. But yeah, so like so yeah, so I'm skeptical of the power of this dragon, and I don't think it'll really see all that much play. Next, we have Leatherford. So it's a 7 CP backup. When Leatherford enters the field, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, play one win character of cost 5 or less among them onto the field, and return the other cards to the bottom of your deck in any order. Its secondary ability is Win Dull, put Leatherford into the break zone, choose one forward. During this turn, the next damage it deals to a forward becomes 0 instead, right? So this is a very expensive backup for Wind, but when you consider the value that you're getting out of it, it's pretty good, right? So let's consider first of all that like generally backups cost you 2 CP to put into play, right? So in this case, so if we deduct 2 CP off of the 7, so like that's 2 CP that you're getting a backup for, right? So we got 5 CP worth of value to sort of like consider here. But when you consider that you're gaining a card, so that's kind of another 2 CP off, because like if you're putting down a 4 CP backup, you're generally getting a card out of it, right? So effectively, if you can put a free CP forward from your deck onto the field, you've broken even on cost in terms of 2 CP for backup, 2 CP for the card that you're like getting, and then 3 CP to put it into play for free, right? So as long as you're getting a free cost win character or more, you're equal or gaining value on this, right? So obviously, any card that says like play a character of cost 5 or up to 5, you want the biggest character you can find, right? So I looked it up on FFTCG, and yeah, so there are free main win forwards that cost 5 less, and that's Canny Center and Bart's, right? And both of these are cards that reactivate backups when you enter play. So yeah, so obviously Leatherford like just like builds really well into that mono win strategy that I had a video on a little while ago, and so yeah, this is a really cool card to sort of like build into that. But yeah, in addition, this card also says play a win character of cost 5 or less. So it doesn't have to be a win forward, it can be a backup as well. So if you want to play like the backup Canny Center, or if you want to put like a Maria down, if you don't like hit these targets, then you do have the option to do that as well. In addition, yeah, so he's also got the ability to just like Win Dull, put him into break zone to basically prevent the next packet of damage that a forward would deal this turn. So it's kind of just like it's equivalent really of a 2 CP backup type effect, because yeah, even though it's on a 7 CP forward, a bulk of the cost of that 7 CP forward is used to pay for the first ability. So in this regard, I don't think it's one of those win cards that you can just like chuck into any win deck, but in this specific like sort of ramp wind archetype, I think that this is very good. You could be on 4 backups, you can tap them, and then discard some cards to put Leatherford in. Then you search for a Bart, you put the Barts on the field, it reactivates all your win characters, which would include Leatherford on the field as well at that time, so you've reactivated all 5 backups that you've got on the field, and then you can like play more cards from there. So yeah, this card really combos well into this whole archetype, and the fact that it does break itself means that if you do need clear space for other backups, you can do that. Or if you want to like break him from the field, just so you can play another one from your hand, you can do that as well. So really excited to try this card out in this particular build. Next, we have Raptor. It's a free CP forward at 6,000 power. It's FFTA2. If you control a category FFTA2 forward other than Raptor, Raptor gains plus 2,000 power. So don't misread this card. It doesn't say for each other FFTA2 character, it gains plus 2,000 power. So it can only gain this plus 2,000 power once, right? It doesn't scale up depending on however FFTA2 forward you have. So in that regard, at best, this is a free CP 8,000 power forward that happens to also have the FFTA2 qualifier, and it's also a standard unit, right? So like besides from like the main free FFTA2 forwards, which is Luso, Adele, and Ilua, between like Wind and Lightning, most of the other FFTA forwards will be standard units. And I keep talking about this like FFTA2 like deck archetype for quite a while. But actually I think like, yeah, in a Wind Lightning build that uses Arc, that uses Luso to get you these standard units and put them into play, free CP 8,000 power is definitely above curve, even though it is a little bit conditional, although it is a pretty easy condition to meet for this sort of strategy. Yeah, I think it's a pretty legit card. Yeah, definitely like not like tier 1 competitive worthy, but like definitely like there's this like huge like there's this huge gap. There's this huge area in FFTCG where you can just play a whole lot of casual decks and do very, very well, and they're all very well balanced. So that like top 5 to 10% of competitive decks is a little bit more powerful then this just like this bulk of tier 1.5 where you can just play a lot of different decks and you can have fun with it. And this fits very well into that archetype. So pretty much like, unless you're playing a major tournament, there's just so many crazy decks to try out, and FF10-2 is definitely one of those ones I want to sort of give a good solid crack at. Next, we have Riku. So it's a free CP forward at 7,000 power. It's a Gullwing as well, and its ability is drop Gullwing forward you control cannot be chosen by your opponent's ability. So this complements the protection ability that Pain has. So effectively, while you both have both out there, both unchoosable by opponent's abilities and summons, as well as any Gullwing units that you play. It's got an S ability, Escape, remove Riku from the battle. You can only use this ability when Riku is in battle. So basically, yeah, this allows you to effectively discard a Riku from your hand in order to like end a combat, right? So this is either where Riku is attacking or is blocking. So yeah, so the pretty much only use of this card is if you're blocking a forward that would destroy Riku, you can just always discard a Riku from your hand to like effectively negate the attack. Or if Riku is attacking and your opponent blocks and then uses some sort of combat pump to like sort of be in an advantageous position, you can always use the ability to pull Riku out of battle. Do note, you're not sort of like removing Riku from the field and putting it back into play, in the sense that like any damage that Riku is already retained on her, any buffs or debuffs still are retained on Riku. So she's not becoming a fresh Riku, she's just being removed from combat. So this is the first card that we've seen that has this sort of ability. I think like this S ability is a little bit underwhelming, but I think both the like Gullwing S abilities are pretty underwhelming as well. And I think that's just kind of that has to balance itself out, because there exists so many Gullwings that if they had a strong S ability, it'd just be like straight up too easy for them to activate those abilities. So I pretty much just see this as a way to help you retain Riku on the field. In that, like, yeah, if you're playing the strategy where you want to try to get both your Riku and Pain set up in a way that they're like that they're unchoosable by your opponent, pretty much the only way for your opponent to deal with your aggression or your field is through combat. And like if you send Riku in, yeah, and your opponent tries to use some sort of like counterplay type ability, yeah, you can always just like pull yourself from the combat and sort of like cut off that option for your opponent as well. So it is free CP, so it's a little bit cheaper than Pain. And like in the past, I have played cards such as Ranger, which was effectively a free CP forward, 7,000 power, that was unchoosable by your opponent's abilities. While this card does trade off the standard unit portion of that, and its ability to have multiple copies on the field, the fact that Riku can like by default has that like non-choosable by abilities effect is pretty solid, and can also pass that to your other Gullwings. I think Riku is much stronger than Pain in this regard. Yeah, so and if I were to play a Gullwings deck, like a modern Gullwings deck, definitely this card would be the card that like would push me more in that direction rather than Pain. And finally, to end off the set, we have Leon. It is a 1-cost forward at 8,000 power, so this is absurdly above the curve. Even higher than Fame Go-Go, which I believe was the highest 1 CP forward before this. But it does come down with a pretty severe drawback. When Leon enters the field, your opponent gains control of Leon. And its secondary ability is when a Category 2 character your opponent enters, a Category 2 character of your opponent enters the field, your opponent gains control of Leon, right? So obviously the second part looks like it's a drawback, but technically it's a way for you to regain Leon. So apparently someone was explaining the lore to me of Final Fantasy 2. Apparently Leon was someone that started off against you at the early part of the game, but then eventually joined your party later on. So it's really cool how they built that into built that lore into the context of this card. So now in terms of this card, it does say like a Category 2 character, so it can be a forward, a backup, or a monster. Or a monster. I don't believe that there exists any Category 2 monsters at the moment, and even amongst Category 2 like forwards and backups, there's not too many of them, which really sort of balances these cards out. So it's really kind of ironic that even though like Furion is on the cover of this box, there's not a big focus on Final Fantasy 2 for this set. Or the amount of cards from this set for Final Fantasy 2 is actually very, very limited. So yeah, so Leon is so amongst Wind itself, the only targets you really have are Leon, Maria, and I believe wasn't it Paul, are like the FF2 characters in Wind, right? So in Fire you also gain access to Guy and Furion, and in Wind you get access to Leon, which obviously clashes with this again, Joseph, and amongst Water there's quite a lot. So there's Minwoo, I think Minwu's the main one, but there's a couple of others as well. Oh, Layla as well. So definitely in Wind Water is potentially a deck that you can sort of build this around, because the new Layla is very good, and the new Minwu is pretty solid as well. But this card includes both forwards and backups. So yeah, so if you do play down even like a Minwu backup or a Maria backup, you do regain control of Leon. So that's pretty cool as well. Yeah, so I definitely do see a world where you have like a 1 CP backup on turn 1, and then turn 2 you just play Leon, play Maria, and now all of a sudden you've got 2 backups and you've got a 9,000 power Leon ready to like strike your opponent, and you didn't have to invest that much CP into it. This card becomes unbelievably more complex in any sort of mirror match. So if your opponent isn't playing an FF2 category deck, then cool. You play this card, you then immediately play a FF2 character, you take your Leon back, right? But in a mirror match, where your opponent can play FF2 characters, this card is just going to switch sides non-stop. And the thing is, that Leon becomes this resource that you're both fighting for. And yeah, and so that's going to be this very interesting part of the mirror match. And if you do want to play FF2 with Leon, getting familiar with that mirror match and how to fight over this Leon is going to be super key to winning the game. And like another annoying thing about this card is that despite this card being a solid forward and also being a rebel, this card actually doesn't combo with the new legendary Furion particularly well, because the new legendary Furion, it reduces its cost by 2 if you control a rebel. The big issue is that when you play Leon, you don't control Leon initially. Your opponent gains control of Leon. So yeah, so when you play Leon, your opponent gains control of Leon, your Furion doesn't immediately jump from 4 to 2 CP. Even though when you do play that Furion, you do regain Leon. Yeah, that's kind of the like annoying thing about him. And then so yeah, playing Leon and comboing with Maria or Minwu or a Guy is probably the best way to go. But yeah, so this is really quite a cumbersome card, but its power does really sort of justify it. On the downside, if you don't have a card to combo with this card, your opponent just like straight up gets a swing with Leon, and your opponent's just going to straight up swing with Leon every single time. Even if you've got like a bigger forward, if your opponent has Leon, they're just going to run it into your guys, because it's much better for your opponent to just suicide their Leon into your forwards than for you to play a category 2 character and to pull it back. And like even like in matchups where you're not in the mirror match against category 2 characters, there will be times where you're just playing against like a rando wind or water deck and they drop a Maria or a Minwu backup and they just steal your Leon. So this card is very powerful. And I think that its power really justifies the drawback of this card. But yeah, unfortunately, like even in like random matchups, you're just going to lose Leon at random situations, and times in the game, unfortunately. But yeah, I really like this card, and I definitely do want to try out the FF2 Rebel archetype. And that's it for our FF6 win set review. Are there any cards that you think I sort of underrated or overrated? Are there any sort of cool, interesting combos that you guys want to try or check out? Do let me know in the comment section below. I'm taking a much more proactive role in sort of communicating with you guys and taking feedback, and also like sort of just interacting with the community. I have been gone for quite a while, but I really do want to get involved now that I'm back and I do have a little bit more free time. I am like recording this right before work right now, so I like I'm still pretty tight on time, but like I do want to try to like prioritize and get more content out for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please thumbs up and subscribe. It just helps out with all the YouTube algorithms, and so I can bring out more videos for you guys in the future. But yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Grand J out.